Looks like we have David Nielsen. Is he right or left, Travis?
David's on camera left, and David's playing Grixis Urza, and David is going to be playing Bradley Brown on Boros Burn.
Bradley's stuck with Burn for a while. I feel like we have seen him on that deck through thick and thin.
I feel like Burn's a deck that a lot of people tend to kind of put down as being an easy deck to play, but that's when I first started playing Modern and Legacy, I played Burn, and I feel like the longer you play the deck, your win percentage just keeps going up because it's really easy to get people to like 17 or 18 or sometimes 19, but it really rewards super tight sequencing, and if you stick with the deck, you can have a pretty good win percentage. Haven't just a little bit slow for what the metagame's been lately. It's kind of revolved around doing turn 3 things, and Burn's kind of a turn 4 deck. But I'm curious to see how it does against this Grixis Urza's deck that we're facing off against here. You know, Grixis Urza is playing the Thopter sword combo, so that has some life gain, but usually it takes a little bit of time to set up, so I think the dice roll is going to be pretty important in this matchup.
Let's try out this new mulligan.
All right, Bradley, just excited about the London mulligan. We're gonna test it out here.
And I like the upgrades to this Boros Burn deck. It has kind of a shoe-in for Horizon lands with 4 Sunbaked Canyons that I think are just strict upgrades to the deck since Modern Horizons came out.
Yeah.
Also been seeing some people meddle with Light Up the Stage in the Burn deck. I'm not sure whether I particularly like that, but it does give the deck a bit more reach.
I think Light Up the Stage is really good in the burn decks that are just black-red. When you have a higher density of 1-drops, it's awkward when you're playing Boros Burn, where a lot of your powerful spells are hanging out at 2, and Light Up the Stage can get to be a pretty awkward card in that situation.
Did you see any elves out there by chance, Travis?
I know we have some regulars that play elves, but I don't know if they're out there right now. But we're leading off with the Goblin Guide here on turn 1, which is where you want to be.
You know that one? Mine's in Italian text. Yes. Just double checking. Oh, and Italian you said? Yeah. So it's just double checking. I'll draw.
Yeah, that's sort of the meek off the top, revealed by David. So the jig is up, probably.
Snow covered into snowland and drop. Go ahead. And I will pass the turn. Draw. Let's swing with the guide.
All right. The guide's revealing Urza, so the jig is definitely up here.
This is a matchup that swings very quickly. It always has kind of a fulcrum point where Bradley has to get enough reach to kill David before he's able to establish Thopter Foundry Sword of the Meek combo, which basically for each mana David invests in that combo, he gets a Thopter and 1 life. So once David gets to around 4 or 5 mana, he can fairly easily outpace Bradley's ability to deal damage, and the game is essentially over at that point. So Bradley has usually about a 3 to 4 turn clock where he has to close out the game in this matchup to have a good chance of winning.
And that is generally the card, if you're on the play on turn 2, that's going to give you the best chance of winning, is Eidolon the Great Revel, where David is dependent on casting a lot of low-cost, are free artifacts and generating value off Urza. With that, are setting up your Thopter Sword combo, which are both 2 casting cost artifacts. So we're going to be taking some damage here. And that Ichor Wellsprings is pretty painful.
That is the Eidolon right there.
How many cards do I have in hand? 7. You haven't been helping me enough, guide. I will pass to you. Neat and tidy.
All right, looks like David was really searching for that land number 3. And this Grixis deck needs to curve out with Mox and then 3 lands to really be able to cast Urza and get that engine going. And you want more lands for your Thopter Sword combo just because every land turns into a Thopter and a life.
Spend a Rift Bolt. I will also take 3 to lock Spike.
Okay,
I
so
will
you're
go to
12, I'm at 7.
Correct. Pass the turn to you.
Draw that friend.
Can be crazy how much the damage the burn deck deals to itself.
Yeah, I think this is about all she wrote for David.
Yeah, this looks pretty unwinnable at this point for David. And he will scoop up the cards here.
I am very dead then.
Rift Bolt essentially is going to hit David down to 4, and he's can only cast 2 more spells, even barring Bradley's ability to attack into the Eidolon of the Great Rebel before he dies. And this Grixis Urza deck is not playing a lot of proactive removal. It kind of has its own game plan that it's hoping to accomplish, and it has kind of a few pieces of interaction in artifacts like Grafdigger's Cage, Pithing Needle, and Snaring Bridge. But none of those would have been good enough in this case.
Yeah, the deck is built kind of to have a turn 4 infinite combo going on, or just to generate a lot of incremental value and have some prison pieces. If you're expecting a lot of burn at a given event, I don't think you would take this deck to that event. It probably has a pretty poor burn matchup.
Yeah, I would absolutely not take this Grixis Urza deck. I would definitely build mono white Martyr proc. As that deck almost can't lose to burn.
Well, not to toot my own horn, but I've definitely played in a Comp REL event and won that matchup because Eidolon plus Skullcrack is pretty good. But you're probably losing that. You got to be on the play. You got to have a really good draw. Ian's just not responding with it. Really.
Well, I do think
incredulous look
there are iterations of burn that can do that. I think Skullcrack has been a little bit less popular of late.
It's true. It's too slow right now.
Yeah.
And the game hasn't really revolved around incidental life gain for quite some time.
True.
The top decks aren't playing really any spells that are going to gain them life.
Right. So, if you are on David's side, what are you looking to bring in here, Travis?
I have no idea what is going to help in this matchup unless you have some Dragon's Claws.
Dragon's Claw is a fantastic card. I doubt that is in the deck.
Hoping you maybe is there a Witchbane Orb in the deck?
There usually is a Witchbane Orb in the deck.
Okay, so we're hoping that we can power out some 0 drops and then whir for a Witchbane Orb and then deal with the creatures?
Yeah, the deck plays 2 main deck Collective Brutalities, or some of them do, so it has a bit of game there. And again, this War deck only needs to survive long enough to get the Thopter Sword combo online, and then the combo itself, even without Urza, is going to gain you enough life that you can usually get out of reach for the Boros burn deck. So we did not see a very powerful hand out of David game 1. And he was also on the draw, right?
Correct. Yeah, being on the play is huge because, like we said earlier, is that burn is pretty much a turn 4 deck. If it's gets an attack in or 2 with the creatures, but Grixis is also a turn 4 deck, and when you're have a fair amount of redundancy in how that could happen, or effectively you're going to beat burn on turn 4 if you have the Thopter Sword and some mana up. So being on the play is pretty huge here. There's a Prismatic Vista.
The other nice thing about this Grixis Urza deck is that it doesn't take that much damage from its mana base. It has a relatively pain-free mana base, and because of Arkham's Astrolabe, which is kind of color fixing for this deck, they can pretty much do everything they need to off of basics.
And you're really incentivized to have a lot of basic snow lands in your deck. And we're drawing off the bobble there. Do you see an Eidolon from Bradley? It's going to come down a turn later this game in David's shoes. And see another bobble on top with that turn 1 Goblin Guide.
Gets me to 17. Yep. Pass the turn to you. Draw the bobble.
I like David's sleeves. I don't really know what that is. It looks like a rabbit of some kind, but
All right.
big heads up play by David there. I mean, I think he probably would have played that bobble anyway, but getting that bobble in before Bradley potentially drops an Eidolon, saving himself some damage here.
There's a red card hanging out in David's hand. Can you tell what that is?
Got a goblin of my own, and that puts me to 15.
It's a Goblin Engineer, which I think is also hanging out in David's hand.
Actually, I think that's a Jur per Aether Grid.
Oh, okay.
However, if David now has the Engineer, I would almost just... Oh, very smart. Okay, so... fuck. I mean, shoot.
Chat, we need your help on
It's
what that
like a
Horizons card
frost.
is.
It's so what this card does is it gives creatures -X, -X, where X is the number of snow lands you control. It's something like silent snowfall.
Dead of Winter.
Dead of Winter. There we go.
Never in the correct half of the deck.
Yeah.
Not even one time.
Let's
Go Team Chat Rescue there.
yeah. Can always depend on chat to help out.
Oh gosh, we have a backup Eidolon here. And David's really looking for something because he's sacrificing the bobble, which you usually might save to gain some life and get a 1/1.
I actually find this card to be like just really cool. Like the art on this card is very striking.
I'm going to play a snow-covered mountain, and an Urza.
The man himself.
Brings a 2/2.
All right, Urza's coming along with a little 2/2.
Urza conveniently out of Eidolon range, so David will not take damage from casting it.
We're just one piece away from going infinite here.
And actually, it's wrapped up as, since David has a Goblin Engineer in hand, that gets the Sword of the Meek into the graveyard. So if Bradley can't either kill David or... no, Bradley basically just has to kill David or kill Urza or Thopter Foundry here, and otherwise the game is over.
Well, Bradley could bring David down to a low enough life total that David can't cast spells for the rest of the game.
Sure. He should only need to cast one spell. And he also has 2 blockers in Urza and a Construct token.
Take another 2 to pass Urza.
Yeah, I think Historic's going to be an interesting format. Maybe like 15 sets down the road.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe
really
less.
see it coming that... I don't see it coming to paper, and Wizards had said that it's a non-competitive format, where if it ever becomes like something that's interesting in paper, then those cards are going to get expensive, and then you're going to have the same problem that you have with Modern, where it's just like this game that we play that has some bottleneck for like playing interesting competitive formats.
Yeah.
And Modern is like incredibly popular, and the player base is pretty large. Like we have 54 people here tonight on a Monday. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Which is way more than like standard usually gets between 8 and 12. We get 90 people here sometimes for F&M, so yeah, I don't really see it replacing Modern so much. And I kind of have a feeling it might be a sort of tiny leaders situation.
Yeah, I think it's a placating format for Arena to help people feel like their cards will retain value.
Yeah, agreed. All right, things are going on in the match.
Yeah, Path hit Urza, so the infinite combo is offline here. That said, again, if this is looking much better for Bradley, so he is now gotten 2 prowess triggers on his Swift Spears, and he comes in for 8. This is exactly what your draw needs to look like if you're Bradley in this case. And David with a relatively strong draw here. it just does not feel like this is going to be quite good enough. Bradley had kind of the perfect mix of creatures and spells.
Yeah, David's pretty locked out of actually winning the game here, just not being able to cast spells. So
Yeah.
there, Urza, you could probably still not getting there if Bradley just draws one more spell.
Cast a Goblin Engineer, going to 2.
And so the big problem here is
Sword in the bin.
Bradley or David can get a Sword of the Meek in the bin, so he has the elements for his combo, but to get the combo started you need to sacrifice an artifact with Thopter Foundry, and David has none of his kind of like useless artifacts like Mishra's Bauble or Arkham's Astrolabe in play to start this chain going. So he would have to sack the Thopter Foundry itself, which puts him even farther away from actually being able to go off here.
I feel like David might have to sacrifice the Foundry now to gain a life and do some...
Yes, he will. He'll have to sack it to gain a life, get a Thopter. The Thopter will get the Sword on it. He'll manage to get a 2/3. But Bradley patiently waiting with the Skullcrack. Yeah, I think David played that. I think David played that well. Unfortunately, like we said, Bradley's draw lined up very, very well there for what David was trying to do.
And it was pretty heads-up sideboarding for Bradley to bring in both the Skullcracks and the pass, like with figuring out what David was on and what were the important cards that were in David's deck. And it looks like we have a fair amount of time left in round number 2 here of Modern Mondays at Guardian Games. We've got 4 rounds, and I'm going to try to go and grab a match that is going to game 2 or 3 and get more coverage for you all.
And I'm going to leave us with a bit of theme music for the moment until we can get our next match online. So we will be back shortly.